The Civil War gave America some of its most brilliant military minds in history. It also gave America some of its most catastrophic generals, men who were handed armies, handed opportunities, and handed moments that could have changed the war, and still found a way to lose them. What makes their failures remarkable is not that they faced impossible odds. In almost every case covered here, the odds were in their favor. The enemy did not have to do anything extraordinary to win. These generals defeated themselves. Both sides made the same mistake, just wearing different uniforms. 5 generals, 2 sides, 1 pattern. By the end of this video, you will recognize exactly what that pattern looks like, and why, when a commander has an army in his hands and still refuses to use it, the consequences last for generations. The American Civil War stretched across 2 massive theaters of operation. In the East, the Union Army of the Potomac repeatedly ground itself against the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia. In the West, control of the great river systems, the Tennessee, the Cumberland, the Mississippi, determined which side could supply itself, move freely, and survive. Hundreds of thousands of men operated across both theaters simultaneously. The war demanded commanders who could read terrain, manage logistics, seize the decisive moment, and absorb the pressure of command. Some of them did it brilliantly. The 5 generals on this list had every resource they needed, and still walked away from victory. Their failures share a common shape. Some froze when the battlefield demanded action. Some attacked blindly when patience would have won the day. Some abandoned the men they were sent to lead. The enemy did not beat them. The moment beat them, because they could not read it, could not trust it, or simply refused to face it. Number 5 on this list is Union Major General Ambrose Burnside, and his failure at Fredericksburg in December 1862 remains one of the most studied disasters of the entire war. Burnside assumed command of the Army of the Potomac on November 7, 1862, reluctantly, and by his own admission. He had turned down the command twice before. He knew he was not the right man, but when Lincoln offered it a 3rd time, Burnside accepted, and almost immediately began planning an offensive toward Richmond. His concept was sound on paper: cross the Rappahannock River at Fredericksburg, move quickly south, and drive toward the Confederate capital before Lee could consolidate his forces. Speed was everything. Speed was exactly what Burnside did not get. The pontoon bridges needed to cross the Rappahannock arrived late, and the delay handed Lee something invaluable: time. While Burnside waited on the northern bank, Lee methodically fortified the high ground behind Fredericksburg. Marye's Heights dominated the entire approach to the city. The sunken road ran along the base of that ridge, sheltered by a stone wall, giving Confederate infantry a protected firing line that overlooked hundreds of yards of open ground. Lee's artillery was positioned above them. Any Union force crossing that open field would be exposed from the moment it moved. On December 13, 1862, Burnside attacked anyway. Not once, not twice, 14 times, his men went forward against Marye's Heights. 14 times, they were repulsed. Confederate General James Longstreet later reportedly told his chief of artillery that he could kill every man who attacked if he had enough ammunition. The position was that strong. On the Union left, further south, General Meade's division actually pierced the Confederate line along a wooded ravine, a real crack in the defense. But General Franklin failed to push supporting troops through the gap. Some historians, including the Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War, placed primary blame for that sector's failure on Franklin rather than Burnside. The command breakdown was layered across multiple levels. What is not debated is the result: more than 12,000 Union casualties, fewer than 5,000 Confederate. Abraham Lincoln reportedly told a visitor the battle was a butchery. Burnside's mistake was not that he attacked a difficult position. It was that he attacked it frontally, repeatedly, without changing his approach, against terrain that made every charge a near certain failure. The ridge did not change between the first assault and the 14th. Only the casualty count did. Number 4 is Union Major General George B. McClellan, and his failure is the opposite kind. Burnside attacked too much. McClellan never attacked at all. McClellan was a gifted organizer. He took the raw Army of the Potomac early in the war and shaped it into a professional fighting force. Soldiers loved him. Lincoln needed him. The problem was that McClellan built an army he could never bring himself to use. During the Peninsula Campaign in the spring of 1862, he advanced toward Richmond with more than 100,000 men and slowed. During the 7 days' battles, with the Confederate capital within striking distance, McClellan lost his nerve entirely, retreating to the James River, and, at one point, leaving battlefield command to his subordinates while he stationed himself aboard a Union gunboat. Then came Antietam on September 17, 1862. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia had crossed into Maryland and was fighting a desperate engagement along Antietam Creek. The battle was brutal. Confederate forces were stretched thin. McClellan held more than 20,000 fresh troops in reserve throughout the entire engagement and never committed them. On the Union left, Burnside's corps spent most of the day attempting to cross a narrow stone bridge over the creek that a small Confederate force was holding. When Burnside's men finally crossed and threatened to roll up Lee's right flank, A.P. Hill's Confederate division arrived from Harper's Ferry and drove them back. The opportunity closed. After the battle, Lee's army retreated across the Potomac in poor condition, bloodied, exhausted, in no shape to resist a determined pursuit. Confederate officers later wrote that they expected destruction. McClellan did not pursue for weeks. Lincoln finally removed him from command on November 7, 1862, the same day Burnside received his appointment. McClellan's army was a weapon he had spent months building and then refused to fire when the target was directly in front of him. Number 3 crosses to the Confederate side, General Braxton Bragg, and one of the most puzzling, self-inflicted defeats of the Western theater. In the summer of 1862, Bragg launched an aggressive offensive north into Kentucky, a campaign with real strategic ambition. If Kentucky could be secured, the Confederacy would push its northern boundary to the Ohio River, threaten Cincinnati and Louisville, and potentially draw the border state permanently into the Confederate orbit. Bragg moved quickly, capturing more than 4,000 Union soldiers at Munfordville on the Green River in September. By early October, he was at the center of the state. On October 8, 1862, his forces struck Don Carlos Buell's Union Army at Perryville, along the Chaplin River. The Confederate assault punished the Union left wing severely, due to an unusual phenomenon called acoustic shadow, where the terrain prevented sound from traveling correctly. Buell was unaware the main battle was even happening for most of the day. His reinforcements were slow. Bragg's forces held the initiative, and by the day's end, had achieved a tactical Confederate victory on the field. Then Bragg withdrew. Overnight, against the objections of his subordinates, including Kirby Smith, Bragg called off the campaign and began evacuating Kentucky entirely. His combined force at that point, united with Smith's army, was comparable in size to Buell's. Buell was so surprised by the Confederate retreat that he was slow to respond. Accounts differ on exactly why Bragg pulled back. Some historians cite supply shortages. Others point to a failure of nerve. Others argue he fundamentally misread the strategic situation. What is not in dispute is the consequence. Confederate Kentucky was finished. The dream of an Ohio River border died on the march south. Bragg had won the battle and surrendered the campaign. Number 2 is Confederate General John Bell Hood, and his failure in the autumn of 1864 is the story of a commander who turned personal frustration into operational catastrophe. Hood replaced General Joseph Johnston outside Atlanta in July 1864. He launched 4 successive offensives, trying to break Sherman's grip on the city. All 4 failed. Atlanta fell on September 2, 1864. Facing disaster, Hood marched his Army of Tennessee, approximately 30,000 men, north into Tennessee, hoping to draw Sherman away from Georgia by threatening the Union supply lines and the heartland of the Western Confederacy. On the night of November 29, 1864, at Spring Hill, Tennessee, Schofield's Union Army slipped past Confederate forces along the Columbia Pike in the darkness. The exact reasons remain actively debated among historians. Hood blamed his subordinates for failing to block the road. Others point to unclear or improperly executed orders from Hood himself. What is documented is the result. The Union Army escaped northward to rejoin Thomas at Nashville, and Hood did not stop them. Hood was furious. The next morning, November 30th, he ordered a frontal assault at Franklin, Tennessee, where Schofield's men had taken up a position along entrenched lines south of the Harpeth River. The attack went forward across nearly 2 miles of open ground in the late afternoon. Hood did not fully employ his artillery, reportedly out of concern for the civilian population of Franklin. Confederate forces briefly broke through the center of the Union line, but Union troops rushed forward and sealed the gap. Schofield's army held through the night and then withdrew to Nashville, having completed exactly the movement Hood had been trying to prevent. The price was staggering: more than 6,000 Confederate casualties in a single afternoon, including 6 Confederate generals killed in the assault. The Army of Tennessee was gutted. When Hood then moved his depleted force to position it outside Nashville, a fortified city now held by George Thomas, with roughly 55,000 men, the outcome became a matter of timing, not uncertainty. On December 15th and 16th, Thomas attacked Hood's thinned lines on both flanks simultaneously. The Confederate line crumbled. Hood's army fled south. He resigned his command in January 1865. The Army of Tennessee never again functioned as an effective fighting force, and Sherman's march through Georgia continued without serious interference from behind. Hood had not been outgeneraled at Franklin. He had made the decision himself in anger against an entrenched enemy his own officers knew could not be broken that way. Number 1 on this list holds that position not simply because of the scale of the failure, but because of its sheer improbability. Confederate Brigadier General Gideon Pillow managed to throw away a victory that his own troops had already won, and then fled the field, leaving his men to surrender without him. Fort Donelson stood on the Cumberland River in northern Tennessee. Its fall would open the river highway directly into the Confederate interior, exposing Nashville and cracking the entire Western theater. In February 1862, Ulysses Grant moved to take it. The Confederate garrison was trapped. On February 15th, Pillow led a surprise assault against Grant's right flank. The attack succeeded. Confederate forces broke through Union lines and opened an escape route leading toward Nashville. Grant was away from the battlefield when the assault began. The Union position was in genuine danger. The road out was open. The Confederate garrison could have moved. Pillow ordered his men back into the fort's earthworks, abandoning all the ground they had taken. Grant returned, assessed the situation, and acted immediately, reasoning correctly that the Confederate right flank must have been heavily depleted by the assault. He ordered General Smith's division forward against the weakened Confederate line. Smith's men overran the earthworks before dark. That night, the senior Confederate commander, General Floyd, passed command to Pillow, who passed it to General Buckner, and then both Floyd and Pillow escaped with a small detachment, leaving Buckner to negotiate the surrender. Approximately 12,000 to 15,000 Confederate soldiers were captured, the largest single surrender of the war to that point. Kentucky and most of Tennessee quickly fell under Union control. Nashville was abandoned. The Western theater opened for the Union campaign that would eventually lead to Vicksburg. Grant later wrote in his memoirs that he had known Pillow in Mexico and judged that with any force, no matter how small, I could march up to within gunshot of any entrenchments he was given to hold. Jefferson Davis suspended Pillow from command for grave errors in judgment in the military operations which resulted in the surrender of the Army. Later, at the Battle of Stones River, Division Commander John Breckinridge reportedly found Pillow cowering behind a tree, instead of leading his brigade forward. Some accounts note that Floyd technically held overall command at Fort Donelson during the breakout decision. The authority was shared and layered, but Pillow's role in ordering the withdrawal is documented across multiple sources. The failure belongs to both men. The consequences belong to the entire Confederate cause in the West. 5 generals. The failure pattern is the same across every one of them. Burnside looked at terrain that told him not to attack, and attacked 14 times. McClellan looked at a retreating, crippled enemy, and waited for weeks. Bragg looked at a battle he had just won, and retreated into Tennessee. Hood looked at 2 miles of entrenched Union infantry, and ordered a frontal charge out of anger. Pillow looked at an open road to Nashville that his own men had fought their way to, and sent them back. The great commanders of the same war did something different. Grant, upon returning to Fort Donelson and finding his right flank in trouble, did not hesitate. He attacked the weakened Confederate line on the opposite flank and turned a defensive crisis into a decisive breakthrough. George Thomas, outside Nashville, refused to be hurried into an assault before his forces were ready, and when he finally struck, he did it on both flanks simultaneously, leaving Hood no answer. Sherman read the entire Western strategic map and kept moving when others around him were still looking for reasons to stop. The worst general is not simply the one who loses. Battles are lost for many reasons: terrain, weather, numbers, supply, the quality of the enemy. The generals on this list lost for a different reason. They were handed the moment. The escape route was open, the enemy was broken, the reserves were fresh, the opportunity was right in front of them, and they still let it go. Burnside's disaster at Fredericksburg shattered Northern morale heading into the winter of 1862 and very nearly fractured Lincoln's political coalition. McClellan's paralysis after Antietam prolonged the war and delayed the political conditions that made the Emancipation Proclamation possible. Bragg's retreat from Kentucky ended the Confederacy's best chance at a northern border on the Ohio River. Hood's decision at Franklin destroyed the last major Confederate army in the West and freed Sherman to complete his march without opposition from behind. Pillow's reversal at Fort Donelson cracked open the entire Western theater and launched Grant's national reputation in the same moment it ended his own. The Civil War was not won or lost by the Army with better equipment or more men alone. It was decided, one decision at a time, by commanders who either read the moment correctly or couldn't face it when it arrived.